explicitly. The American Zionist Empire. They talk about these things all the time. They know where this is coming from. Okay, so they kind of get it. They know the score. They're not going to give up that easily. And any internal strife we see within Iran, I think, would quickly be erased when a foreign force comes in to push global homo on them as a whole.
People are asking about the U.S. embassy in Iraq. I was about to move to this subject. So from what I can gather, and this is just happening right now, a few hours ago, rockets have crashed into Baghdad's green zone near the U.S. embassy. So people are asking on the regular chat, was the U.S. embassy touched? It seems that a rocket has been targeted roughly in that area and that maybe it's not damaged. But anyways, essentially the U.S. embassy has been targeted by a rocket. Now, it seems that the evidence that people have for now is that this rocket was coming from the east, where in Iraq, there are a bunch of resistance movements that are associated with Iran, that are influenced by Iran. So, I don't know, man. When I see a freaking rockets like this coming out of nowhere, I tend to suspect other suspects than those that the media want me to believe. It's like, I feel like I'm getting played here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't know what happened. We'd have to, wait for more news to come out, although I doubt there would be anything that's particularly, challenging to the official narrative here. I don't ever overrule or overlook the idea of a false flag and these types of things, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, look, when you park an embassy in the middle of hostile territory, someone's going to try to shoot at it. I mean, it is what it is. And what you find oftentimes is a lot of these groups, this is how incoherent our foreign policy and how insane our big government is. A lot of these groups are being funded by us. It's completely believable that this is a rocket launched by ISIS at the American embassy. So a group funded by the United States and Israel shoots a rocket at the American embassy. It just goes to show you what a disaster our involvement in this area has been. And there's no logical way of looking at this. It's totally insane.
Absolutely. And we've been discussing this on the show with David Duke. It's not clear the whole interaction between Israel and ISIS. There seems to be some sympathy sometimes and some public declarations of wars other time. I'm confused and I don't want to fall for that kind of bullshit. I'm not saying it's impossible that a group that would be influenced by Iran would send a rocket, but how is that justifying an invasion of Iran? I'm not getting there yet.
I'm not there either. It just seems like they're stretching more and more.
All right, so let's have a look at the Trump tweet that we've been talking about. He says, if Iran wants to fight, that will be the official end of Iran. Never threaten the United States again. And I believe that when he's talking about threatening the U.S. again, it's not clear. Is he referring to the attack of today? Or is he referring to statements? Because I don't think it's a democratic committee, but whatever it is that manages their government is often emitting things that get translated as death to America or stuff like this. And so he may be referring to that kind of threat, and he's saying, if you do that once again, we will be erasing your country from the earth.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is more of the same bluster that we saw regarding North Korea. And keep in mind, a lot of the Fox News BoomerCon base, they love this kind of talk, man. They love a guy that comes out. Barack Obama had his faults, and I'm not a fan of Barack Obama per se, but so many criticisms of Obama were on this line of like, we're tired of this American apology tour. Barack Obama's bowing to foreign leaders, apologizing for the W. Bush administration, and all this nonsense. So these are the type of people that they get off on mean tweets from one world leader to another. Again, I don't think anything will happen. I hope that I'm right, but I'm unfortunately open to being wrong on this question as well.
Yeah, I'm hanging on to my theory that threats, ultimately, they only have a function for pacifism. And ultimately, threats by voice and threats by tweets, they have a pacific function, although it doesn't look like it, and from an intentional analysis, it doesn't work. It remains the case that if you are going into a war, you don't want to threaten. And so I'm relying on this to believe that perhaps Donald Trump is just playing strong arm, but not really wanting to follow up on it. Nietzschean modernist says, why can't the average American see the connection to Israel? They have been agitating for war with Iran for a very long time. I absolutely agree. I mean, Netanyahu has PowerPoints about how it would be good to invade Iraq and it would be good to combat Iran.
I think the average American does see the connection. I just think they have a different opinion on it than we do. Right? There's no way you could tell me that a Fox News conservative doesn't see the connection between the U.S. and Israel. They just love it. They absolutely love it. There's no denying it. And white liberals and even the POC liberal coalition that we kind of mentioned before, they see the connection. And to their credit, even though they don't really like us, they hate it. So it is preeminent. It is everywhere. It's just a matter of what side do you kind of fall on the whole thing. I think we see it. It's just a matter of how you analyze it. Some people think it's a good thing. I think obviously JF and myself realize that it's a huge problem.
Very interesting and a scary thought, really, because what you're saying is people have been convinced that we are allies to the Jews and we must act with them against the rest of the world.
I think ultimately that is the fundamental reality of the post-World War II era. The victory of the Allied powers over the Axis powers is just something that has put forth this worldview that to be white and of European descent also means that you must be siding with the Jews on all things. And obviously we understand this is largely, it's incoherent. It makes no sense really when you kind of break this stuff down. But that the myth, the great Hitler myth is really one of the to our point about Santa Claus. The Hitler myth is the new Santa Claus, right? This is the myth that they hold over our head as adults. Again, whether we want to engage in historical revisionism regarding World War II or not, it doesn't even matter at this point. It's just, it has been used negatively against white people. And that post-World War II myth, it has been something that has tied a lot of white countries, particularly the United States, to Israel. And it's led us to believe that our interests are intertwined. And, when you think about what liberalism has turned into, this idea that liberalism is always fighting, and when you think about what liberalism has turned into, this idea that liberalism is always fighting for the oppressed everywhere, well, I mean, this meme of anti-Semitism has never been stronger. I mean, Donald Trump brought it up in the State of the Union. 70 some odd years after the Holocaust, he brought it up. So whites seem to find their identity in fighting for the little guy. And Israel has this image of being the little guy. And it's this marriage made in hell, dare I say, because it has had disastrous consequences for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And beside the possibility of a tough war that would cause us trouble in Iran, I want to point out that there are possible international consequences to if Trump was just to start a war targeting Iran very specifically. There can be allies of Iran that show up. There can be teaming up. There can be war by proxy within Iran. There can also be moves that Russia could decide to do in front of the fact that Iran is occupying the military attention of the U.S. Russia could make moves on things that we don't expect right now, but they may have other interests, and they may just use the opportunity to do something else. And that's beside the fact that there's a huge portion of the Middle East that is Muslim, hateful toward Israel, and that could find ways to make trouble to Israel in ways that the U.S. could not even be ready to respond to. I don't know what the state of chaos will be, but I think it can have much bigger consequences than just a conflict within Iran.
Yeah, I think if there was a major declared war with Iran, you would definitely see the Iranian government receiving quite a bit of foreign aid, certainly from Russia and probably from China as well. And in a sense, it would be a new Vietnam where the North Vietnamese had MiG fighter jets and AK-47s, the Soviet-made weapons that were sent their way. in terms of how the Muslim community would look at this, I for one, I don't think that the Jew versus Muslim propaganda is believable. I think it's almost more of a race war than it is a religious war. And in fact, I had seen an article, and JF, this is my fault. I should have sent this to you before we went live, talking about how American and Jewish propagandists were seeking to stir up the Sunni minority in Iran against the Shiite majority. And when you consider that the Saudis have been bombing Yemen, the Houthis in Yemen, who are Shiite, who have been backed by Iran, it's not even really just a Jewish versus Muslim thing. There are different sects of Islam that disagree on certain things. Of course, the Shiites and the Sunnis have different belief systems. And then these different groups within the Islamic religion also have different racial makeups. I mean, the overwhelming majority of Shiite Muslims are Persian, whereas Sunni Muslims are typically either African or Arabic. So there are racial tensions that are represented within these lines. So I don't see Saudi Arabia as a group that, or any other Sunni Wahhabi state that would get as a group that would get involved to destabilize Israel. In fact, I think they would be on their side. But I certainly think the Iranians and the Chinese would heavily be involved in funding the Iranians as a means to bleed the Americans dry in a Vietnam or even Soviet-era Afghanistan invasion type war of attrition.
That would be terrible. We would essentially be under the loans of the Chinese government, who own a lot of the debt of the US, and they would essentially be drying us at the military level while making cash with us at the economic level. Who knows how that would turn?